Hello, my name is Host Eric. I am the host of Talking with Famous People, and I am here tonight with an array of famous people. Hami, INFP, listener, JC, Jesse, Omnia, Ot, Nahil, Pretentious Thick Rib is offline at the moment, Kiwi Sauce, and Nandi. We're discussing what each type feels the need to prove. So, this is an interesting topic to me because I think the ENTP is obviously a type that feels the need to prove themselves a lot. And I know that one thing that I hate is being called unprofessional. So I would imagine that part of the ways in which the ENTP feels the need to prove himself is that he wants to be taken seriously. He doesn't want to be seen as a joke, and he knows he's kind of flaky, and he knows that he's prone to enthusiastically adopting something only to discard it not that long later. How he comes out of adolescence and young adulthood coping with that reality, or how much awareness he has of that reality, I think is going to go a long way in how much he feels the need to prove himself and where. So, at the end of the day, I think the ENTP is a broad range of things he needs to prove himself at, but primarily it's going to be professional competency and uh, probably some sort of performance thing, whether it be comedy or music or talking like this or some other manner of thing. He'll feel the need to prove himself equal to or superior to existing things, I guess, while concurrently not wanting to actually see any of those things because he doesn't want to actually check. So that's the ENTP's thing that they need to prove, or how they relate to that feeling of needing to prove things. I think that ENTJ, which is another high needing to prove stuff type, feels the need to prove not just competency but dominance. I think ENTJ has a little bit more need to prove dominance than ENTP in general, although ENTP can go there in a heartbeat if depending on how in general secure they feel with their position or how clearly defined the boundaries of their fiefdom is or something like that. Uh, I think the ENTJ also needs to prove more on conventional ways of determining success. So it's gonna the ENTJ is gonna care more about having a nice house and or having a nice car, making a lot of money. But the ENTP will probably care more about it than he lets on in general. So uh, I think NTs in general are going to feel the need to prove some kind of competence. I would love to hear from Hami about INTJs and what he thinks they need to prove, they feel they need to prove. And then I'd like to go on to JC and find out what an SF feels the need to prove. So, Hami, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think INTJs, their biggest need to thing that they need to prove to themselves is that they know the truth. I guess.
Do
So
they need to
they
prove it
like
to
on every
others or themselves?
they need to know the truth. They need to find out the truth or know the truth for themselves, and then spread that knowledge out to others.
See, okay, this maybe is an extroverted thing in general, extroverted feeling thing in general. That when I say feel the need to prove, I mean feel the need to prove to others. But it's interesting that you say you feel the need to prove to yourself first, and then to spread to others. So, okay, let's go ahead and make that distinction for the introverts. You feel the need to prove that you know the truth. That's basically the gist of it. That the thing you ascribe to is in fact accurate, verifiable.
Yeah,
Okay,
and then also the thing that you said about NTs, I think that's accurate in general.
proving
They need to be competent.
prove competence, right?
Yeah.
Okay, JC, what about from an ESFP perspective?
Um, I don't know if I'm ever trying to prove anything. I
Okay,
don't. I mean, I guess I do. I wouldn't word it like that.
you wouldn't
That's
word it
what it
like that.
is.
So you're not
No,
trying. You're not trying to impress anybody, basically.
no. I mean, I guess there's a sense of wanting to be authentic. I guess that's a more of a SI thing. Um, but besides that, I'm not. Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not trying to, especially not to other people. I want to be liked. I do, but only to the extent that I want my genuine self to be liked. Like I'm not. There are only so many changes that I'm willing to make. I'm willing to make more for people who I care more about. If
So
that makes sense.
would you say it's accurate to say you want to be liked, but you don't care about being impressive?
Mm. Yeah, sure. And I don't think I'm trying to impress people. Um, that's not my end goal. That's not my goal. I
Okay.
think maybe some ESFPs do want to impress people though, and it's probably more in the entertainment arena. They want to be funny. They want to be
Well,
that
I
type
think
of
wanting to
class clown.
succeed is a little bit different than wanting to impress people. Wanting to succeed because uh, you believe in yourself and think you have something to offer is a little bit different than wanting to attain the symbols of success and wanting other people to know that you're successful, right? So I don't know. I think it's quite possible that with ESFP, with FI in the second slot, that in fact one of their biggest tools is authenticity. ENTP, I think, has a really hard time coming to understand what it means to be your authentic self because we just simply. I like that idea of aligning FI with understanding your authentic self because that would explain a
Hmm.
lot about how ENTPs don't seem to understand, like, oh, well, I'm ascribing to this thing right now that most people, they'll make that decision at least weighing somewhat what their authentic self feels about it. But ENTP simply doesn't include that calculus at all, and that's why we have a tendency to argue stuff that we don't care about, or you know, and to insist that everything be logically consistent and everything because we don't have that experience of comparing it to our authentic self growing up, and we kind of have to learn to even realize that that's a way to understand things, and that's where the authenticity lies. That ultimately, to the extent that I'm authentic, it's because I've experienced damage. It's made me empathetic. I can see things better from other people's perspectives. I know what it feels like to suffer. Things like that are humanizing, authenticizing experiences. Anything else you'd like to add about ESFJ experience of impressing people?
ESFP or ESFJ.
ESFP.
No, I think we just attempt to use our natural abilities to our advantage.
Okay. In case you didn't hear that at home, she said we attempt to use our natural abilities to our advantage, which makes sense. Who wouldn't? It's a
Right.
proceed. It's a proceed kind of way to go too. You're saying, well, look, here's what I've given. Let's just walk along this path and see where it takes me. Natural abilities taking you where they're going to take you. So, well, how does that relate to wanting to prove yourself to yourself or others? Well, it's a matter of there's various things you do with the path, right? As we talked about in an earlier video, I think it's a good analogy. You can either spend time choosing the path, you can spend time walking down the path, you can spend time evaluating the path you're on to make sure it's the right choice, make sure it was the right choice. You can spend time pausing and admiring how much of the path you've already walked, and or you can spend time taking pictures of the path that you've already walked and putting it on Facebook and saying, "Look how high up I am, and see how far I've walked." you know, those are different things you can do with the path, and the reason why one is if you're using SE as your nature, your inclination is to keep walking along the same path. That's why they need to periodically focus on their fourth slot NI so they can say, what's the path again and why am I on it? And what's the truth here? What's the purpose? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's why TI DOMs have trouble with procrastination. It's because they're habitually deciding whether they're on the right path.
Yeah, and based on what I said about INTJs, I think that's where the perception of INTJs being arrogant comes from.
Explain.
So, like I said, that INTJs need to. I mean, they feel that they need to find what the truth is about whatever topic they're discussing, and after they find that, or they think they find that, they go and they spread that knowledge, and other people might take that as being a know-it-all or being arrogant.
Oh, right, because you wanna share what you've generated.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's a problem with creative types in general, right? Is that we produce things, and to the extent that we produce things, they're only meaningful if somebody else has some interaction with them. I mean, obviously, if you're not going to start a company manufacturing hammers if nobody wants to buy your hammers. And the same thing is true with ideas and the sort of work product that NTs tend to focus on. At the end of the day, it's our ability to communicate our our utility to the world that is significant, and it is going to manifest as negatives for different types differently. It's going to manifest for you as arrogance or pedantry or whatever. For ENTP, it's going to manifest as annoying, taking up too much space in the room, that kind of stuff, you know? So that's kind of our challenges, I guess. We go on to anybody else who's a different type want to chime in here? Jesse, Omnia, Ott Nihil, QV Sauce, or Nandi want to chime in on what on this topic? What is it we're talking about again? I forget what we're talking about. We're talking about what we need to prove, right? Okay, so you want to chime in on that, Nandi, as an INFJ?
I don't know if this is right, but basing it on the cognitive function stack of an INFJ, it could be them also trying to find whole truths about how people should work together or relationship-wise, or how the world should be, and then trying to enforce that or create it in the external world.
I'd be inclined to say INFJs tend to feel they need to prove themselves on the realm of TI because they know the truth with their NI and they know how to present it for people's happy consumption with their FE. But when they do run into trouble, it's because someone says, well, that's not logically consistent. So that's the battleground where they're fighting on a lot. One might say the same thing about the ENTP, that what we really are concerned about is fighting the battle of managing people's perceptions across the board. That we really want to make sure you think about us what we want you to think about us. So, I mean, that's why it's difficult to narrow it down with the ENTP. But I think INFJ is a lot easier to narrow it down because it's a TI thing mostly. And they become really good with TI, and so they're justifiably a little bit spiny about it. But I think ultimately that's what they feel they need to prove.
Maybe as an ESFP, I try to prove to myself that I can do certain things, like but it's more of a proving to myself, still more proving to myself than to other people.
Okay.
Like, I can do this. I'm like my own cheerleader, you know.
Right. So, Omnia Ott Nihil. You say, truth is truth. I'm not sure exactly what that's in response to. And you say, insert something about most efficient reality navigation. So is that what you need to prove? That you're saying INTP has the need to prove that they have the most efficient reality navigation system? Uh,
That might actually be pretty accurate.
right.
In a certain extent, like if you think about the cognitive functions, that's what they spend their time doing, attempting to come up with this system that works and then apply it to
But
everything.
I would say it's not efficient, but logical. So I think
Ultra.
efficient would be TE.
I would say the INTP feels the need to prove that I think they need to feel the need to prove that they're effective because it's a struggle for them. It's a TE thing. They need to prove. They feel they need to prove that they can hang with the TE SE combo, and it's the SE that's causing them a lot of problems. But see, unlike the HP, whose difficulties with FI don't necessarily manifest as something he feels they need to prove uh, in and of itself, except maybe in that authenticity way. Like you feel the need to prove you're authentic. I guess that's another thing we need to prove. But I'm thinking the INTP might need to prove the fact that they're effective. Now, not necessarily um, prolific, not necessarily the most, the hardest working or the most work product, but effective, ideally little, uh, with little effort. Efficiency lays in logic, and that logic can also predict emotion in some ways. Well, but that's not. That's look. There's the logic of efficiency, and there's the logic of consistency, and they manifest somewhat differently. So if I'm adhering to the logic of efficiency, and there's a problem with people littering in the park, I might just throw up a sign with a big new fine and stick a cop there and bust a few people and figure the problem will stop. And if I'm applying the logic of consistency, I might look to some fundamental principle and say,
But
well, we don't want to establish this kind of law in general. Uh, okay, well, you're shifting ground though, right? I answered you're doing that thing. You're doing the metasoap thing. You're going, efficiency lays in logic, and logic can also predict emotion in some ways. I answer it directly. Well, I don't answer the emotion point, but I don't see how that's particularly relevant. I mean, emotion can predict outcomes as well. You can guess that something's going to dismantle because you can read the other person's emotions. As an INTP, if you have it in the fourth slot, that's going to be a bit more of a challenging modality for you, but you understand what I mean. Oh. So yeah, it's all about the point of diminishing returns. Well, I mean, I don't think it is. I think there's a lot of things that are rather a binary choice that aren't determined by uh, level of impact like that. That it's one or the other, and the relationship is something different than that kind of relationship. There's a lot of different relational mechanisms between things, right? um, okay, so things that people need to prove. I would say that effectiveness or correctness in general is something INTPs need to prove, feel they need to prove, or at least uh, invulnerability to incorrectness might be a better way to put it. As far as other types that I know go, the USFJ needs to prove she's perfect to everybody all the time, which is
Oh my
a bit
goodness.
a bit of a challenge for ESFJ. They do an excellent job
That
of
is
it,
so
though. They pretty much succeed. Okay, they do. They're always trying to prove they're perfect to everybody, but they're never displaying things that obviously are that, right. They're very cognizant of being interpreted as that, so they don't necessarily come across like that. They're really good at it. But yeah, perfect perfect life, including the perfect amount of imperfections. That's how careful they are about this
I
shit.
have just enough imperfection in my life that I'm still human.
Right? Like, no, don't straighten those magazines. That's the spot of imperfection.
I don't know, like that.
Otherwise, we'll look too perfect, right? Otherwise, we'll look too perfect, and we don't want that. Then you somehow are trying to show off, and then that doesn't look good. So, you know, that's that's the ESFJ.
Right. That
Um,
spot between being perfect and not showing off.
right. You gotta find the sweet spot. Um,
Right.
for the ISFJ, I think they've got to prove that they're reliable somehow. I don't know why, because they're the most reliable people in the world, but they it's really important to them that they have the answer to like
It might be the same for ISTJs.
maybe.
I think they're both very loyal types in the colloquial sense of the word.
ISTJ, I think, also has a need to prove physical stuff. At least the males do. That maybe because that SE in the fifth slot combined with T instead of F is sort of a that's how their thinking manifests as how to establish sort of masculine status or whatever is being being good at the physical stuff, being fit.
Mm. Do you think that extroverted having an extroverted judging function means like those people may have more to prove to the outer world than maybe if you have an introverted judging function?
Well, I think if you have extroverted thinking, you're going to take a really sensible approach to proving yourself. You're going to say, well, here's how you can prove yourself. You get a big house and a fancy car and a trophy wife and you know like and so it's very sort of protocol driven approach to achieving status. And I think if you have extroverted feeling, then it's going to manifest similarly, except it's going to sort of be a principle of the Hippocratic oath of extroverted feelings. Don't do risky shit. Be safe. You know what works. Stick with it. Go with it. Make sure everyone's happy. And your dream goal as a extroverted feeler is to be in a situation where you're giving a symposium on some new crafting technique, and you just are so likable, and you're just cute as a button, and also so competent and such a good teacher, and everyone loved it. I mean, and I understand that feeling entirely. I've got a very similar feeling that's like my dream kind of situation, except without without all the nonsense, right? Like I don't want the crafting, and I don't want the oh my god, you are cute as a button and stuff like that. But I do like the idea of being in a position to perform and performing really well in a situation and making everybody happy. I like that idea a lot, and that's something the FE Dom and the ENTP share. But I don't remember the actual question. It's something about extroverted judging functions have to impress things more in the outside world, right? So the introverted
Yeah,
judging
it's like
functions, yeah. I mean, like I don't need to impress. I need to. I don't need. That's the whole idea of the introverted thinking is I don't need it to be. I don't need you to understand the consistency. I need to understand the consistency myself. And if you want to come push up against it, I'll use that understanding of consistency to dismantle your wrongness. That's the TI approach. The TE approach is much more concerned with you understanding what's consistent, and I don't really care what's inside my own head. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's oh sorry, what did
I just said to Omnia Otna Heel's last comment. See, INTPs and ENTPs have some things in common. We like to blow shit up. Go ahead, JC.
Oh, I was saying, like, I think it's like, if you believe that you have more of a control over the outer environment, then that would mean that you have more things to prove and establish in the outer environment, in that the extroverted judging function.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, keeping in mind that everybody has one of each kind, and so
Right.
even if you are preferring your introverted judging function, ultimately, whether or not you're extroverted or introverted is going to have probably more to do with whether you feel the need to prove it externally than which judging function you have, I would guess. And so that introverts in
Right.
general feel less of a need to prove things externally, and extroverts feel more of a need to do so. Any other
Okay.
thoughts on this topic? Okay, well, I know we didn't do all types, but we did the ones that came to mind here, and those are our thoughts on what each of the 16 personality types likes to prove themselves
Has
about.
to prove.
Has to prove, likes to prove, right? Well, I mean, you feel happy, you feel satisfied when you successfully do prove that thing, I suppose. So anyway,
I suppose.
feel the need to prove themselves about it. Thanks for watching, and have a pleasant evening.